Kent, England, spring of 1818. The morning sun filtered through the leaded windows of Sutherland Hall's library, casting diamond patterns across the Turkish carpet where Miss Beatrice Sutherland sat curled in her favorite chair, a volume of political philosophy open in her lap. 21 years of age, with hair the color of polished mahogany and eyes like amber catching firelight, she presented the picture of contentment, a young woman at peace in her private sanctuary. But the tremor in her hands as she turned the page betrayed the turmoil beneath her composed exterior. On the escritoire beside her lay a letter bearing her father's seal, its contents having arrived at breakfast with the weight of a sentence passed. The Viscount Sutherland, in his infinite practical wisdom, had secured her future. A betrothal, an arrangement, a solution to problems she had only half understood existed within the walls of her childhood home. The sound of boots on marble announced a visitor before the library door swung open. Lord Callum Fitzroy entered without knocking, a privilege earned through 9 years of friendship, of shared confidences, of 1,000 quiet afternoons exactly like this one. Yet as Beatrice looked up to greet him, she failed to notice the tension in his shoulders, the slight hesitation in his step, the way his green eyes searched her face with an intensity that went far beyond mere friendly concern. If stories of love that waits in silence, of friendships that hold deeper truths, move your heart, subscribe now and stay until the end. You won't want to miss what happens when courage finally speaks. "You look troubled," Callum observed, settling into the chair opposite hers with the easy familiarity of someone who had occupied that same spot 1,000 times before. His copper-touched blonde hair caught the morning light, and for just a moment, Beatrice noticed how the years had changed him from the lanky youth who had taught her to climb trees into someone altogether more substantial. Then the thought passed, dismissed as irrelevant. "Father has made an arrangement," she replied, setting the book aside with deliberate care. "Mr. Dominic Ashmore has requested my hand. Father has accepted on my behalf." The words fell between them like stones into still water. Callum's hands tightened on the arms of his chair, knuckles whitening, but his voice remained steady. "Ashmore? The merchant's son who bought his barony?" "The very same." Beatrice rose, moving to the window overlooking the gardens where they had spent countless hours in childhood. "Father says it's an excellent match. Mr. Ashmore is wealthy, respectable, kind by all accounts. He can settle the estate's debts I had not fully realized existed until this morning." "And do you love him?" The question, spoken so quietly she almost missed it, made her turn. Callum stood now too, backlit by the window, his expression unreadable in shadow. "Love?" Beatrice laughed, the sound brittle even to her own ears. "Callum, you know my views on such matters. Love is a pretty fiction we tell ourselves to make practical arrangements more palatable. Marriage is a partnership, an alliance of families and fortunes. Mr. Ashmore offers security. That is enough." "Is it?" Something in his voice, a thread of desperation she had never heard before, made her pause. But before she could examine it further, her younger sister Charlotte burst through the door, full of excited chatter about wedding preparations, and the moment dissolved like morning mist. The days that followed brought a whirlwind of activity to Sutherland Hall. Dominic Ashmore proved himself every bit the gentleman her father had promised. Attentive without being overbearing, generous without ostentation, possessed of agreeable manners and a pleasant enough countenance. Dark-haired and well-formed, he cut a respectable figure when he called to take tea, to walk the gardens, to discuss their future with the careful courtesy of a man negotiating a business contract, which, Beatrice reminded herself firmly, was precisely what this was, a sensible arrangement between sensible people. Romance was for novels and naive girls who believed in fairy tales. Yet she found herself comparing every conversation with Dominic to the ease she felt with Callum. When Dominic discussed politics, his views were conventional, safe, lacking the passionate debates she and Callum had engaged in since they were children. When they walked the gardens, Dominic admired the roses with generic praise, while Callum could name every variety, remembered which she had planted herself at age 14, knew without asking that she preferred the wild hedge roses to the cultivated ones. "You seem distracted, Miss Sutherland," Dominic observed during one such walk, his tone polite but distant. "I hope the prospect of our union does not trouble you?" "Not at all, Mr. Ashmore," she replied automatically, smoothing her muslin skirts. "I was merely thinking of the autumn planting. The north garden could benefit from some changes." He nodded, accepting this transparent fiction with the same courtesy he applied to everything. They were, she realized with a sinking feeling, performing a pantomime for each other, both playing roles they had agreed to without either truly understanding what lay beneath the surface. Meanwhile, at Westbury Manor, Callum Fitzroy wrestled with demons of his own making. As the second son of the Marquess of Westbury, he had learned early that his path in life would be different from his brother's. William would inherit the title, the estate, the responsibilities. Callum had been given education, a modest allowance, and the freedom to make his own way in the world. He had used that freedom to remain close to home, close to Sutherland Hall, close to Beatrice. 9 years. 9 endless, agonizing years of loving her from the careful distance of friendship. He had watched her grow from a precocious girl with scraped knees and ink-stained fingers into a remarkable woman whose sharp mind and stubborn independence captivated him more with each passing day. He had been there for every triumph, every disappointment, every moment of laughter, and every instance of tears. And he had never said a word. Fear had kept him silent. Fear that speaking would destroy the precious friendship they shared, that she would look at him with pity or worse, embarrassment, and he would lose even the small place he held in her life. Better to have her friendship than nothing at all, he had told himself 1,000 times, now that cowardice would cost him everything. "You're brooding again," his brother William observed, entering the study where Callum sat staring blindly at a ledger. "It's most unlike you. Usually you're the cheerful one while I shoulder the family burdens." Beatrice is engaged. William's expression softened with immediate understanding. As children, he and Callum had been inseparable, and William had long suspected the truth his younger brother had never spoken aloud. "To Ashmore?" "Yes, I heard. The announcement will be made formally at the Meryton Assembly next week." "I should have told her." Callum's voice cracked on the words. "Years ago, I should have found the courage to tell her how I felt. Now it's too late." "Is it?" William leaned against the desk, his voice thoughtful. "She has not married him yet. An engagement can be broken." "On what grounds? That her childhood friend suddenly decided to declare feelings she has never returned? She would think me mad. Or worse, she would pity me." Callum shook his head. "No. I made my choice 9 years ago when I first realized I loved her. I chose silence. Now I must live with the consequences." "What of her family's situation? The debts that forced this arrangement?" William pressed gently. "You could appeal to our Uncle Thornbury. He has resources enough to—" "The Duke?" Callum laughed bitterly. "William, you know as well as I that our uncle barely acknowledges our existence. He considers our country concerns provincial and beneath his notice. He has never shown interest in my affairs, romantic or otherwise. Why would he involve himself now in something so sentimental? No, I cannot and will not beg for his intervention." But even as he spoke the words, a different voice whispered in his mind. A voice that sounded remarkably like Beatrice herself from one of their many philosophical debates. The greatest tragedy is not failure, but the refusal to try. The Meryton Assembly Rooms glowed with candlelight on the appointed evening, filled with the cream of Kent society gathered to celebrate the betrothal of Miss Beatrice Sutherland to Mr. Dominic Ashmore. Musicians tuned their instruments in the gallery, while servants circulated with champagne and delicate refreshments. The air smelled of beeswax, perfume, and the hothouse flowers that decorated every available surface. Beatrice stood beside her betrothed, accepting congratulations with a smile that felt painted on her face. She wore her finest gown, ivory silk with delicate embroidery of gold thread that caught the light with each movement. Dominic, resplendent in evening black, played his role to perfection, his hand proprietary at her elbow, his comments to well-wishers appropriately gracious. Yet her eyes kept searching the crowd for a familiar figure. Callum had not yet arrived, and his absence created a hollow feeling beneath her ribs that she refused to examine too closely. "Looking for someone, my dear?" Dominic inquired, his tone pleasant, but with an edge that suggested he had noticed her distraction. "I wondered if Lord Fitzroy would attend," she replied honestly. "He is my oldest friend. I should like him to share in our happiness." Something flickered across Dominic's face, an expression too quick to interpret before his urbane mask slipped back into place. "Of course. How thoughtless of me not to consider it. Your friendship with Lord Fitzroy is well known." The slight pause before friendship made her glance at him sharply, but before she could respond, a ripple of awareness moved through the crowd. Conversations faltered and resumed at a different pitch. Heads turned toward the entrance. Callum had arrived. He stood in the doorway dressed impeccably in evening attire, but there was something different about him tonight. Gone was the easy, affable manner she had always known. In its place was a tension that communicated itself across the crowded room, a coiled energy that made her pulse quicken for reasons she could not name. Their eyes met across the distance. For a moment that stretched into eternity, the crowded assembly room faded away until there existed only the two of them, connected by a thread of understanding that went deeper than words. In his gaze, she saw something she had never allowed herself to see before: devotion, desperation, and a grief so profound it took her breath away. Then Charlotte was pulling at her sleeve, chattering about the dancing soon to begin, and the moment shattered. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Beatrice danced the first set with her betrothed, smiled at his conventional compliments, and tried not to notice how Callum stood at the edge of the room, watching her with that same devastating intensity. She danced a country dance with her brother-in-law, a quadrille with Dominic's friend from London, and accepted champagne she barely tasted. During a brief respite between sets, Callum approached. He bowed correctly to Dominic, greeted her with perfect propriety, but the words felt like lines from a play neither of them had rehearsed. "Miss Sutherland, Mr. Ashmore, allow me to offer my congratulations on your betrothal." "Thank you, Lord Fitzroy," Dominic replied smoothly. "We are most gratified by the support of Miss Sutherland's friends. I understand you and she have known each other since childhood?" "Since we were 12 years old," Callum confirmed, his eyes never leaving Beatrice's face. "I have had the privilege of witnessing her growth into the remarkable woman she has become." There was something in his voice, a weight of meaning that made her heart stumble. But before she could respond, Lady Pemberton claimed Dominic's attention regarding some matter of precedence, drawing him away into the crowd. For the first time that evening, Beatrice and Callum stood alone together amidst the press of people. The orchestra struck up a waltz, couples forming on the dance floor. "Will you dance with me?" Callum asked quietly. "One last time, before everything changes?" She should refuse. Convention dictated she save the intimate waltz for her betrothed. But something in his voice, that thread of barely contained emotion, made her place her gloved hand in his. The moment his arms settled at her waist, Beatrice felt an unexpected confusion. The proximity was at once familiar and strangely new. She had danced with Callum countless times before, yet tonight, something felt different. A disturbance in her carefully ordered logic that she could not quite categorize. His hand, proper yet warm even through their gloves, seemed to burn where it touched. The scent of his cologne, bergamot and something woodsy she had never consciously noticed before, filled her senses in a way that made concentration difficult. Because as they began to move together, with the perfect synchronicity born of 9 years of friendship, she felt something shift deep in her chest, not a revelation, but a question she had never allowed herself to ask. "You've been avoiding me," she said, needing to fill the charged silence between them. "Since the engagement was announced, you've barely visited Sutherland Hall." "I thought it appropriate," Callum replied, his voice rough. "Your betrothed deserves time to court you properly, without childhood friends interfering." "You could never interfere. You are—" She stopped, suddenly uncertain how to finish that sentence. What is he to me? My dearest friend? My confidant? The person who knows me better than I know myself? What am I, Bea? He used her childhood nickname, the one no one else employed, and the familiar intimacy of it made her throat tighten. "Tell me, because I find I no longer know what place I hold in your life." She looked up at him, truly looked, and for the first time allowed herself to see what had been there all along. It was written in every line of his face, in the way his eyes held hers with desperate intensity, in the careful distance he maintained, even as protocol demanded proximity, in the tremor of his hand at her waist. "He loves me." The realization struck with the force of lightning, illuminating years of moments she had misinterpreted or ignored entirely. Every casual touch that had lingered a heartbeat too long, every heated debate that had left her pulse racing, every time he had appeared exactly when she needed him, as if attuned to her unspoken distress, every instance of watching her when he thought she would not notice. 9 years of love, offered silently, and she had been too blind to see it. "Callum," she whispered, his name catching in her throat. But before she could find the words for the revelation blooming in her chest, the music ended. Dominic appeared at her elbow, politely claiming her for the next dance, and Callum stepped back with a bow that was too precise, too controlled, his expression shuddering closed once more. As Dominic led her back to the dance floor, Beatrice felt as if she were splitting in two, her body going through the expected motions while her mind reeled with the implications of what she had just understood. She had accepted a proposal from a man she barely knew, agreed to build a life with someone she felt mere friendly regard for, all while the man she could not complete the thought. Dared not. Because to acknowledge what she felt for Callum Fitzroy would be to admit she had wasted 9 years, would be to throw her family's carefully negotiated arrangement into chaos, would be to choose heart over head in exactly the way she had always disdained. The dance with Dominic seemed to last hours. His conversation washed over her, pleasant and meaningless. She smiled and nodded and felt nothing except an increasing sense of suffocation, as if the assembly room's warm air could not fill her lungs properly. When the set finally ended, she excused herself to the retiring room, needing a moment alone to compose herself. But as she passed through the corridor lined with portraits of previous generations, she heard voices from the small alcove near the garden doors. "Cannot possibly go through with it now. You heard the announcement. Everyone knows." The voice was male, cultured, and heartbreakingly familiar. "But you promised. You said you would find a way." A woman, young, her voice thick with tears. Beatrice should have continued walking, should have respected their privacy. But something about the raw emotion in those voices rooted her in place. "I know what I promised, Clara," the man replied, and Beatrice's heart stuttered as she recognized Dominic Ashmore's voice. "I thought I could manage this, thought we could find a way to be together, despite society's strictures. But my family has made it clear. If I do not secure an alliance with proper lineage, they will cut me off entirely. My father worked too hard to buy our place among the gentry for me to throw it away on a mere dama de compagnia," Clara finished bitterly. "A nobody. I understand, Dominic. I have always understood. You are not a nobody." The passion in his voice made Beatrice flinch. "You are everything to me. But what can I offer you without my family's support? How can I ask you to marry me when I have nothing?" "So you will marry Miss Sutherland instead." The confirmation fell, like an axe. Beatrice gripped the doorframe, her legs suddenly unsteady. "It is a practical arrangement," Dominic said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Miss Sutherland has been very clear that she does not believe in romantic love. She wants security, respectability, an alliance of interests. I can provide those things. In return, her family's connections will solidify my position in society. It is adequate for us both. And what of me? What becomes of us?" There was a long silence before Dominic spoke again, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Society is full of arrangements, Clara. Marriages of convenience are common enough. If Miss Sutherland and I reach an understanding, if she is amenable to certain accommodations, perhaps we could still find moments together, discreetly." The words hit Beatrice like a physical blow. A marriage of convenience, a pretense for society while both parties pursued their true interests elsewhere. Was that what her future held? A husband who loved another, who saw their union as mere social camouflage for continuing an illicit affair? She had advocated for practical marriages, had scorned romantic notions as childish fantasy. Now, faced with the reality of what such an arrangement meant, she felt ill. Before she could process further, footsteps approached from the opposite direction. Beatrice moved quickly away from the alcove, pressing herself into the shadows as Dominic and a young woman, Miss Clara Hartley, she realized, whom she had seen occasionally serving as companion to elderly Mrs. Pemberton, emerged and hurried separately back toward the assembly room. Beatrice stood alone in the corridor, her carefully constructed worldview crumbling around her. She had been so certain that pragmatism was wisdom, that protecting oneself from the vulnerability of emotion was strength. But watching Dominic's obvious anguish over the woman he truly loved, she understood for the first time that there were worse fates than risking one's heart. Living without love at all was infinitely worse. She did not return to the assembly room immediately, could not face the bright chatter and meaningless congratulations when her mind churned with questions she had spent years refusing to ask. Moving as if in a dream, she slipped through the garden doors into the cool spring night. The Meryton Assembly Room's gardens were modest but well kept, lit by paper lanterns strung between trees still delicate with new leaves. The sound of music and laughter faded behind her as Beatrice walked deeper into the shadowed paths, her silk slippers whispering against gravel. "B." She turned to find Callum emerging from the darkness, his expression stricken. Of course he had noticed her slip away. Of course he had followed. He had always followed, always been there, for 9 long years. "You should not be out here with me," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It is not proper. I no longer care about propriety." He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that she could see the rapid rise and fall of his chest, the tension in every line of his body. "I have cared about propriety for 9 years, B. About doing the right thing, the expected thing, the safe thing. And it has cost me everything. Callum, no, please." He held up a hand, and she fell silent, recognizing something desperate in his face. "I need to say this. Have needed to say it for so long, I can barely remember a time before these words lived in my throat, choking me." The paper lanterns swayed in the breeze, casting wavering shadows across his face as he struggled visibly for composure. When he spoke again, his voice was raw with emotion barely contained. "I have loved you since I was 17 years old, Beatrice Sutherland. Do you remember that summer? We were reading Rousseau in your father's library, arguing about the social contract, and you laughed at something I said. Really laughed, not the polite titter ladies are taught. And in that moment I knew I would never love anyone else. I knew it with the certainty most men reserve for matters of faith." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes but could not speak, could not move, could only listen as 9 years of silence finally broke. Every book we discussed, every ride through the countryside, every afternoon in the garden, those were not merely friendship to me, B. They were torture and paradise intertwined. To be near you, to see your brilliant mind at work, to witness your kindness and your strength. It was everything. But knowing you saw me only as a friend, only as safe, dependable Callum, that was agony. Why did you never say anything? She managed, her voice breaking on the words. Because I was a coward, he replied simply. Because I feared losing even the small place I held in your life if you knew the truth. Because as the second son with no fortune to speak of, what could I offer you beyond devotion? You deserved better than a man with nothing but love to give. He took a step closer, and she could see his hands trembling at his sides, see the tears he refused to let fall. But I cannot stay silent any longer, Bea. I cannot watch you marry Ashmore, cannot stand by while you build a life with a man who sees you as a convenient arrangement rather than the extraordinary woman you are. You deserve to be loved, passionately, completely, with every fiber of someone's being. And I, God help me, I love you that way. I have always loved you that way. The words hung between them, irrevocable. The music from the assembly room swelled in the distance, a bright counterpoint to the heavy emotion of this shadowed garden. I overheard something tonight, Beatrice said quietly, needing him to understand what she had learned. Dominic and a woman named Clara. He loves her, Callum. He is marrying me despite loving another because his family demands a respectable alliance. Our engagement is a sham, a practical arrangement that serves everyone's interests except our hearts. She watched comprehension dawn across his features, followed immediately by hope so intense it hurt to witness. You cannot marry him, Callum said urgently. Not knowing this, not condemning yourself to a life of emptiness when what? When you are here offering me love instead? She heard the edge in her own voice, years of self-protection making her sharp even now. And what of the practical concerns, Callum? What of my family's debts? What of your own position? You said yourself you have no fortune. Am I to choose love over my family's welfare? Over reason and sense? Yes. The word burst from him with startling vehemence. Yes, Bea, that is exactly what I am asking. Choose love. Choose the possibility of happiness over the certainty of comfortable misery. Choose me, even though I cannot offer you wealth or status, because I can offer you something far more valuable, a love that has endured 9 years of silence and would endure a lifetime of challenges. He reached for her hands then, and she let him take them, let him draw her closer until they stood mere inches apart. His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. I know you believe romance is foolish, he continued, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I know you pride yourself on pragmatism and reason, but I also know you, Beatrice, better than anyone else in the world. And I know that beneath all your careful logic, beneath all your defenses, you have a heart capable of tremendous feeling. You are not as immune to love as you pretend to be. How can you possibly know that? She challenged, even as her treacherous heart pounded at his nearness. Because of the way you look when you read poetry, even though you claim to find it frivolous. Because of how your voice softens when you speak to children or injured animals. Because 9 years ago, when my mother died, you sat with me through the night without saying a word, just held my hand. And I could feel your grief for my grief as if it were your own. His thumb traced circles on her palm through her gloves, the simple gesture sending electricity up her arm. You feel everything, Bea. You simply refuse to acknowledge it. She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the position she had held for so long. That emotion was weakness, that vulnerability was foolish. But standing here with Callum, feeling the truth of his words resonating in her chest, she could not summon the energy for pretense. I am afraid, she admitted in a voice so quiet she wondered if he heard. I am terrified, Callum. Because if I admit that you... She could not finish the sentence, could not speak aloud the truth that was becoming undeniable. That you love me too? He finished gently. Is that so terrible to say? It changes everything. It makes me a fool who spent 9 years blind to what was right in front of her. It makes this engagement a farce. It throws my family into chaos and solves none of our problems while creating countless new ones." Her voice rose with each word, panic and longing warring within her chest. "It is utterly illogical and completely impractical and absolutely true," he interrupted, bringing one hand up to cup her face with infinite tenderness. "Is it not?" The touch broke something in her. Some last wall she had maintained between her heart and her mind crumbled away, leaving her exposed but strangely free. Looking up at him, at Callum, her dearest friend, her constant companion, the man who had loved her faithfully through years of oblivious indifference, she finally allowed herself to feel what she had suppressed so long. She loved him, had loved him perhaps, for far longer than she could admit even now. Loved the way he argued passionately about ideas that mattered, loved his quiet strength and his sharp humor, loved how he saw her, truly saw her, in a way no one else ever had. Loved him with a depth and intensity that terrified her precisely because it meant everything she had believed about herself was wrong. "It is true," she whispered. "God help me, it is true." The words barely left her lips before he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back with 9 years of repressed feeling pouring out in one devastating moment. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into his embrace with a sense of rightness so profound it felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Callum rested his forehead against hers. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion and desire. "How do we make this right?" Before Beatrice could answer, a voice interrupted from the path behind them. "I believe that is a question we must all answer together." They sprang apart to find Dominic Ashmore standing in the lantern light, his expression unreadable. Beside him, half hidden in shadow, stood Miss Clara Hartley. The garden silence grew heavy, broken only by the distant sound of the orchestra. Beatrice's lips still tingled from Callum's kiss, her heart hammering against her ribs. Callum positioned himself protectively beside her, his hand tightening around hers with protective force, refusing to release her. Dominic took an instinctive half-step forward, positioning himself to shield Clara from full view, his face a careful mask of controlled panic beneath his usual urbane composure. It was Dominic who broke the silence, his voice weary rather than angry. "I wondered when this would come to light. Truth tends to emerge despite our best efforts to contain it." He glanced at Clara, who looked terrified, then back at Beatrice and Callum. "How much did you overhear, Miss Sutherland?" "Enough," Beatrice replied, surprised to find her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "Enough to understand that we are all trapped in arrangements that serve everyone except our hearts." Dominic nodded slowly, moving closer, so the lantern light illuminated his features fully. He looked younger than his 29 years suddenly, vulnerable in a way his usual urbane mask concealed. "I owe you an apology," he said directly to Beatrice. "I have been unfair to you. When your father approached mine regarding a potential alliance, I saw an opportunity to solve my family's social ambitions while maintaining other connections." He reached for Clara's hand, drawing her forward into the light. "But it was cowardly. You deserved honesty, not elaborate deception." Clara kept her eyes downcast, clearly mortified to be part of this scene. Beatrice studied her with new eyes, pretty in a quiet way, with dark hair and gentle features. Young, perhaps 20, with none of the confidence or education Beatrice had been afforded by her position. "How long have you loved each other?" Beatrice asked, surprising herself with the question. Clara looked up then, her brown eyes swimming with tears. 2 years, Miss Sutherland. I have served as companion to Mr. Ashmore's great-aunt during that time. He has been nothing but respectful and honorable, despite everything. Except in agreeing to marry me while loving another, Beatrice pointed out, though without rancor. She understood too well now how fear and practicality could lead even good people into poor choices. "For which I am truly sorry," Dominic said. "When my father purchased our barony, he made clear that my next move must be to secure an alliance with established gentry. Your family's lineage is impeccable, Miss Sutherland. And you yourself made it clear you did not seek romance in marriage. I convinced myself it could work, that we might reach an understanding, find a way to maintain appearances while pursuing separate interests." "A marriage of convenience, then," Beatrice said quietly, and Dominic flinched at the assessment spoken so plainly. "Yes, it would have been practical for us both, I thought, but I see now." He looked between her and Callum at their joined hands and the clear devotion in their faces. "That you deserve far better than comfortable pragmatism." Callum spoke for the first time since Dominic's arrival, his voice taut with barely contained emotion. "And what of Miss Hartley? What does she deserve?" "Everything I cannot give her," Dominic replied bitterly. "Love without shame, a life without hiding, a marriage recognized by society rather than merely tolerated in shadows. But my family will never accept." "Then perhaps," Beatrice interrupted, an idea forming with sudden clarity, "the solution is not to seek your family's acceptance, but to make acceptance irrelevant." All three turned to stare at her. She stepped forward, her mind racing with the kind of strategic thinking she had always prided herself on, only now applied to matters of heart rather than head. "Mr. Ashmore, you wish to maintain your position in society while marrying the woman you love. I wish to break an engagement that should never have been made. Lord Fitzroy wishes—" She glanced at Callum, seeing her own hope reflected in his eyes. "Well, we all know what he wishes. And Miss Hartley deserves a life without shame. Surely 4 intelligent people can find a solution that serves all our interests." "What are you proposing?" Dominic asked cautiously. Beatrice took a deep breath, committing fully to the madness of what she was about to suggest. "I propose we create a different scandal, one that places the blame for our broken engagement on me rather than you, that preserves your reputation while freeing us both." She looked at each of them in turn. "Tomorrow, I will go to my father and confess that I have realized I cannot marry you, Mr. Ashmore, because my heart belongs to Lord Fitzroy. There will be talk, certainly. I will be called foolish, impractical, guided by emotion rather than reason. All the things I have spent years claiming to despise." Callum started, but she squeezed his hand to silence him. "Let me finish. The scandal will reflect poorly on me, not on Mr. Ashmore, who will have his engagement broken through no fault of his own. Indeed, he will appear the wronged party, which should earn him sympathy rather than censure. With that sympathy, if he then chooses to court and marry Miss Hartley after a suitable interval, society will be far more forgiving than if he had broken our engagement himself to pursue a dama de compagnia." She watched understanding dawn across Dominic's face, followed by cautious hope. "You would sacrifice your reputation to ease my path?" he asked incredulously. "My reputation will survive," Beatrice assured him with more confidence than she felt. "I am the daughter of a viscount with impeccable lineage. People will whisper, certainly, but I will not be ruined. Merely labeled romantic and foolish, charges I am prepared to bear if they lead to genuine happiness rather than convenient emptiness." Clara spoke up for the first time since the initial revelation, her voice hesitant but clear. "But what of your family's debts, Miss Sutherland? You said Mr. Ashmore's wealth would settle them. If you break the engagement, how will that be resolved?" It was the question Beatrice had been avoiding, the practical concern that had driven her to accept Dominic's proposal in the first place. She felt Callum tense beside her, no doubt thinking the same thing. That love, however genuine, did not pay creditors. "I do not know," she admitted honestly. "But I also know that marrying for money while both parties love elsewhere is not the answer. Surely there must be other solutions, economies to be made, assets to be sold, help to be sought from extended family." My father accepted the first offer that came, rather than exploring all options. Perhaps if I explain— Your family's debts are significant, Dominic interrupted gently. I made inquiries before approaching your father. The estate is mortgaged, investments have failed, there are loans outstanding. I do not say this to distress you, but to be honest about the scope of the problem. The words hit Beatrice like cold water, reality reasserting itself despite her hopeful plans. Even if she found the courage to choose love, how could she justify leaving her family in ruin? Her father was not a young man. Her mother's health was delicate. Her younger sisters would need dowries if they were to make respectable matches. Was her personal happiness worth condemning them all? She must have made some sound of distress, because Callum pulled her close, his arm around her shoulders. We will find a way, he said fiercely. I do not know how yet, but we will find a way. You are not alone in this, Bea. Whatever challenges we face them together. With what resources? She asked, hearing the edge of hysteria in her own voice. You said yourself you have no fortune. My family needs immediate relief, not vague promises. Perhaps I was right all along. Perhaps love is a luxury only those with independent means can afford. Do not say that. Callum turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders, his green eyes blazing with intensity. Do not let fear make you retreat back into cynicism. There are always solutions, always possibilities we have not yet considered. Give me time to think, to speak with my brother, to what? To wave a magic wand and make everything perfect? Beatrice pulled away, panic rising in her chest. This is precisely why I avoided sentiment, Callum, because feeling deeply only makes the practical impossibilities more painful. I love you. God help me, I do. But love does not settle debts or save estates or provide for families. Perhaps Dominic was right. Perhaps an understanding between practical people is the kindest solution for everyone. No. The word came from an unexpected source, Clara Hartley, who stepped forward with surprising determination for someone so young and supposedly meek. Forgive me for speaking out of turn, Miss Sutherland, but I cannot remain silent. I have watched Mr. Ashmore suffer these 2 years, watched him try to be honorable while his heart was breaking. I have lived as a shadow, grateful for any crumb of attention, telling myself that hidden love was better than none at all. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate as she continued. And I can tell you from that experience, it is not enough. It is a slow kind of death, to love someone you cannot claim, to live a half-life in the margins. Do not condemn yourself to that fate, Miss Sutherland. Do not condemn any of us to it. There must be another way. The conviction in her voice, the hard-won wisdom in someone so young, made Beatrice pause. Was this what her future held if she married Dominic? Years of watching Callum from a distance, of polite encounters that concealed devastation, of slow erosion of everything that made her herself. Before anyone could respond to Clara's impassioned speech, the sound of footsteps and voices approaching from the assembly room made them all freeze. They were about to be discovered, 4 people in what would appear to be a highly compromising situation. Quickly, Dominic said urgently. Miss Hartley and I will return separately through the garden entrance. If we are not seen together, there is nothing for gossips to report. Miss Sutherland, Lord Fitzroy, you should return to the assembly. No one has yet noticed your absence, I think. We will speak further tomorrow, once we have all had time to consider our options. There was no time to argue. Clara and Dominic melted into the shadows, just as a group of young ladies emerged onto the garden path, laughing and chattering about the evening's dancers. Beatrice and Callum managed to separate to a respectable distance before being spotted, and explained their presence in the garden as seeking fresh air from the close rooms within. But as they returned to the assembly, Beatrice felt as if she were moving through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Around her, people laughed and danced and celebrated her engagement to a man she would not marry. Beside her, Callum maintained careful distance despite the kiss they had shared, the confessions exchanged. And somewhere in her chest, her heart pulled in two directions, toward love that seemed impossible, and toward duty that promised only emptiness. The music played on, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath its bright notes, and Beatrice Sutherland, who had always prided herself on rational thinking, discovered that some problems could not be solved through logic alone. She did not sleep that night. Instead, she sat at her window overlooking the grounds of Sutherland Hall, watching dawn break over the gardens where she and Callum had spent countless hours of childhood. Her mind turned over every aspect of their impossible situation, seeking some solution that would honor both heart and duty. By the time her maid arrived to help her dress, Beatrice had made a decision. She would speak with her father honestly about the true state of affairs, about Dominic's divided affections, about her own feelings for Callum, about the impossibility of building a marriage on such foundations, and then she would accept whatever consequences came, whether those meant financial ruin or social scandal or both. She had accused Callum of cowardice for keeping silent 9 years. She would not be guilty of the same, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. As she descended for breakfast, she found her father's study door ajar and heard voices within, her father's measured tones, and another, less familiar, but somehow significant. She paused, not intending to eavesdrop, but arrested by her name spoken in the stranger's voice. "Understand your surprise, Lord Sutherland. I realize this is unprecedented. But after hearing the entire story from my nephew, I find I cannot in good conscience remain neutral. Your Grace, you honor us with your concern, but I confess I do not understand your interest in this matter." Her father sounded confused and slightly overwhelmed, a tone she rarely heard from him. "Then allow me to be plain," the stranger replied, and something in his voice, an echo of Callum's cadence, made Beatrice's heart leap. "I have not been an attentive uncle to my nephews. Focused on my own affairs, childless, and perhaps too absorbed in matters of state and society, I have kept them at arm's length. But last night, Callum came to me, something he has never done before, with a story that moved me profoundly." What story might that be? Of 9 years of patient devotion, of a young man who has loved your daughter with a constancy rare in this age of cynicism, of his recognition that he could not offer her the security she deserved, and his willingness to step aside and see her settled, despite it breaking his heart. A pause. And of your daughter's recent engagement to a man who, I understand, does not love her as she deserves to be loved. When Callum humbled himself to ask for my help, the first time he has ever approached me for anything, I realized I had been given an opportunity to rectify years of familial neglect. Beatrice leaned closer to the door, barely breathing. "Mr. Ashmore is a perfectly respectable gentleman," her father replied stiffly. "The engagement was made with Miss Sutherland's full knowledge and consent. But not, I think, with her heart's consent. Forgive me for speaking so plainly, Lord Sutherland, but I am too old and too wealthy to concern myself with false delicacy. Your daughter accepted Mr. Ashmore because you needed his money to save the estate. She sacrificed her happiness for her family's welfare, an admirable quality, but a tragic one when unnecessary. You presume to know my daughter's feelings, Your Grace? I presume nothing. Callum told me what he has observed, that Miss Sutherland does not look at Mr. Ashmore the way one should look at one's intended husband, that she has been quieter since the engagement, more withdrawn, that the spark of passionate debate and lively interest that characterized her has dimmed." Another pause, and most tellingly, that when Callum confessed his feelings to her last night, she confessed in return that she loved him, has always loved him, though she refused to acknowledge it even to herself. Beatrice pressed a hand to her mouth, muffling the sob that threatened to escape. Callum had gone to his uncle, had told him everything, had sought help despite the humiliation of admitting his position. Your Grace, even if all this were true, and I do not concede that it is, the fact remains that I have debts, substantial debts. My steward has made clear that without a significant infusion of capital, we may lose Sutherland Hall entirely. Mr. Ashmore's settlement would resolve these difficulties. What alternative do you propose? I propose to settle your debts myself. The words fell into stunned silence. Beatrice gripped the doorframe, her legs suddenly unsteady. I beg your pardon? You heard me correctly, Lord Sutherland. I will clear all outstanding mortgages, satisfy all creditors, and provide a further sum to ensure the estate's continued prosperity. In return, I ask only that you release Miss Sutherland from her engagement to Mr. Ashmore and permit my nephew to court her properly. Your Grace, I cannot possibly accept such a sum. The amounts involved are substantial, tens of thousands of pounds. What possible motivation? I have no children, Lord Sutherland, no direct heirs. My fortune will someday pass to my brother's sons, and William as the elder will inherit the dukedom as well. But Callum... The voice softened with evident affection. Callum has been like a son to me these past years, though I have been remiss in showing it. And if providing for him means ensuring his happiness, then it is money well spent. But to give such a sum for a nephew's romance, surely there are better investments of your capital, Your Grace. I am 63 years old, Lord Sutherland. I have more wealth than I could spend in 3 lifetimes, and no family close enough to leave it to with any warmth of feeling. If I cannot use my resources to enable genuine happiness for those I care about, then what good is any of it? A pause. Besides, I have heard remarkable things about your daughter from multiple sources. Her intelligence, her character, her independence of mind. Such a young woman should not be sacrificed on the altar of financial necessity when a simple redistribution of wealth could solve the problem. This is most generous, Your Grace, most extraordinary, but you worry about propriety, about what such an arrangement looks like. I understand. So let me be clear about the terms. I will purchase the outstanding notes on Sutherland Hall and gift the property back to you free and clear, in trust for your heirs. This is a gift to your family, not a payment for your daughter. Miss Sutherland and Callum will be free to court as any other young people of their class, without the burden of artificial financial obligations coloring their choices. If they decide they do not suit after all, then so be it. But at least the decision will be theirs, not one forced by debt. Beatrice heard her father clear his throat, a sound he made when deeply moved and trying to hide it. Your Grace, if you are serious in this offer, it would change everything. I am entirely serious. My solicitor can begin the necessary arrangements immediately if you consent. The debts could be settled within a fortnight. Then I accept. With profound gratitude, Your Grace. Though I fear my daughter will think me manipulative, first arranging one engagement to solve financial woes, now accepting help to break it. Then allow me to speak with Miss Sutherland myself. She deserves to understand that this is not manipulation, but liberation. That she now has a true choice, unburdened by fear for her family's welfare. Beatrice did not wait to hear more. Heart pounding, she fled back up the stairs to her room, her mind reeling with the implications of what she had overheard. It was impossible. It was too good to be true. It was exactly the sort of miraculous intervention she had always scorned in romantic novels, the convenient rescue that solved all problems through external means rather than earned resolution. And yet, it was happening. Callum's uncle, the Duke of something, she had not quite caught which dukedom, was quite literally buying her freedom. Not her, she corrected herself firmly. Her father's estate, her family's security. The difference was significant, even if the effect was the same. She now had a choice, a genuine choice, unburdened by the weight of duty to her family. The realization left her breathless. The Duke of Thornbury proved to be a tall, distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes remarkably similar to Callum's. He visited Sutherland Hall later that morning, formally presenting himself to Beatrice and her mother and requesting a private audience with Miss Sutherland specifically. They met in the library, the same library where Beatrice had spent countless hours with Callum, where she had received news of her engagement to Dominic, where so much of her life had unfolded in the company of books and ideas. Your Grace, Beatrice began, finding her voice somewhat unsteady. I must confess, I overheard your conversation with my father this morning. I apologize for the breach of etiquette. No apology necessary, Miss Sutherland. In your position, I would have done the same. He settled into a chair, Callum's chair, she noted, and regarded her with shrewd but not unkind eyes. My nephew tells me you are a woman of formidable intelligence and independence. I hope that is true, because I wish to speak with you frankly about a rather delicate matter. Please do, Your Grace, and if I may, I would like to speak frankly as well. She took a steadying breath, her mind already organizing the thoughts that had kept her awake most of the night. I spent the hours since learning of your generosity considering the nature of charity, dependence, and what it means to accept help. And I realize that what troubles me most is not the debt itself, but passivity. The Duke's eyebrows rose with interest. Go on. Sutherland Hall's difficulties stem from poor investments and outdated agricultural practices, problems that will recur even if the current debts are settled. Last night, rather than simply waiting for rescue, I reviewed my father's ledgers. She moved to retrieve papers from the escritoire, spreading them before him with confidence born of preparation. I have identified 3 tenant farms on the estate's periphery that could be sold without impacting core operations. Additionally, I have researched new crop rotation methods being employed successfully in Norfolk that could increase yields by 30%. There is also potential for a small-scale textile operation using our wool production. She met his eyes directly. What I lack is capital for implementation and time to prove the concept before creditors foreclose. I do not seek a gift, Your Grace. I seek an investor, someone willing to provide the necessary funds in exchange for a modest return once the estate becomes profitable again. I have prepared projections. She indicated her careful calculations. Within 5 years, Sutherland Hall could not only repay such an investment, but generate sustainable income. The Duke studied the papers with growing astonishment, then looked at her with something approaching respect. You prepared all this in one night? Desperation breeds efficiency, Your Grace, and I am not content to be a damsel waiting for rescue. If I am to have my choice— Her voice softened. If I am to choose Callum freely, then I must also ensure that choice is not built on continued dependence. We must be partners in restoring our family's fortunes, not recipients of endless charity. A slow smile spread across the Duke's face. Callum did not exaggerate your formidable intelligence. Very well, Miss Sutherland. I will not offer you a gift, but rather a business arrangement. I shall provide the capital you require as an investment, taking a 20% stake in the estate's agricultural operations. You and Callum will manage the implementation. If your projections prove accurate, I profit modestly. If they do not, I am wealthy enough to absorb the loss. Either way, you will have earned your freedom rather than merely accepted it. Relief and gratitude flooded through her. That is more than fair, Your Grace. There is one additional condition, he added. This arrangement is between you and me, Miss Sutherland, not between your father and me. You will be the primary partner in this venture, with full authority over estate management decisions. If you are to build a life with my nephew as equals, you must begin as you mean to continue, as a woman of independent means and judgment, not as property passed between men. He paused, considering. And as for Callum, to ensure he enters this union as a partner of substance rather than as a dependent, I intend to settle upon him the Thornwick House estate, which currently stands vacant. It is a modest property, but sound, with productive lands and a comfortable manor. This will provide him with his own establishment and independent income, so that when you marry, you come together as equals in fortune as well as affection. Beatrice felt her throat tighten with emotion. Your Grace, you have thought of everything. I am merely ensuring that 2 intelligent young people have every advantage as they build their life together. The rest, Miss Sutherland, will be entirely your own achievement. After he left, Beatrice remained in the library for a long time, thinking about freedom and choice and the strange twist of fate that had transformed impossible into possible. She thought about Dominic and Clara, whose love deserved the chance to flourish without shame. She thought about her father's relief that his family would be secure. She thought about her mother and sisters, freed from the specter of ruin that had hung over them. But mostly, she thought about Callum. About 9 years of friendship that had masked deeper devotion. About passionate debates over books, comfortable silences in gardens, shared laughter and mutual understanding. About green eyes that looked at her as if she were something precious. About a man who had loved her patiently through years of blindness and never once made her feel foolish for not seeing what he offered. She thought about kissing him in the garden, about how right it had felt after years of convincing herself that such feelings were frivolous. And she realized that she had been lying to herself for a very long time. She did not merely love Callum Fitzroy. She was in love with him, had been for years, perhaps, without admitting it even to herself. Every debate that left her energized, every shared silence that felt complete, every moment of watching him laugh or argue or simply exist in her presence. Those had all been love, disguised as friendship because she had been too frightened to name it properly. The practical considerations that had driven her to accept Dominic now fell away, revealing the truth she had hidden beneath layers of rationalization. She wanted Callum, wanted his laughter and his challenges and his steady presence, wanted to build a life with someone who saw her completely and loved what he saw, wanted, simply and profoundly, to be loved the way he had loved her for 9 patient years. And now, miraculously, impossibly, she was free to choose that. She found him in the gardens of Westbury Manor an hour later, having walked the familiar path between their estates with her heart in her throat and a decision made. He was reading beneath an oak tree, as he so often did, and the sight of him, absorbed in his book, copper-bright hair catching the afternoon light, made her chest tighten with a feeling so intense it almost frightened her. He looked up as she approached, and the hope that flared in his eyes nearly undid her completely. "B," he stood quickly, setting the book aside. "I heard my uncle visited you. I hope he did not overstep. I asked him to help, but I did not intend for him to solve all my problems with a stroke of his pen," she interrupted gently. "To give me the freedom to choose what my heart wants instead of what duty demands. You must know I would never presume to buy your affection. The arrangement he made with your father is separate from anything between us. You are under no obligation. I know that." She moved closer, near enough to see the gold flecks in his green eyes, to notice the nervous tension in his shoulders. "Your uncle made that very clear. As did you, I think, when you went to him for help, despite how it must have wounded your pride. You asked for aid not to trap me, but to free me. There is a difference. So you understand that whatever you choose, whether it is me or not or someone else entirely, you are now free to make that choice without fear?" "I understand," she confirmed, "and I have made my choice." She watched him brace himself, saw him preparing for rejection, even as hope and fear warred in his expression. "Callum Fitzroy, I have been an absolute fool." Whatever he had been expecting, it was not that. What?" "A fool," she repeated firmly. "For 9 years, I had something precious right in front of me, and I was too blind, too proud, too frightened to see it. I convinced myself that love was frivolous, that sentiment was weakness, that protecting myself from vulnerability was wisdom. But I was wrong about all of it." She took his hands in hers, feeling them tremble slightly. "You have been my dearest friend since we were children. My confidant, my intellectual partner, my steady companion through every significant moment of my life. And somewhere along the way, perhaps at 17 when you first realized you loved me, perhaps earlier, perhaps later, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you." His breath caught audibly. "B, I am in love with you, Callum. With your mind and your heart and your ridiculous patience in waiting for me to see what should have been obvious years ago. I love how you argue with me as an equal, how you listen when I need silence, how you make me laugh even when I am determined to be serious. I love you exactly as you are, as you have always been, and I cannot imagine building a life with anyone else." She pulled him closer, near enough that she could feel the rapid beat of his heart through his waistcoat. "So yes, I am breaking my engagement to Mr. Ashmore. Yes, I am choosing you, despite the scandal it will cause, and the gossip it will inspire, and the fact that everyone will say I am being romantic and impractical and emotional. Because you know what I have learned. Sometimes the most practical choice is the one that makes your heart sing. Sometimes wisdom lies in acknowledging feeling rather than suppressing it. And sometimes," her voice broke slightly, "sometimes the greatest risk is not in loving too much, but in refusing to love at all." For a moment, Callum simply stared at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears and something that looked like disbelief. Then he was pulling her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, his face buried in her hair. "Say it again," he whispered hoarsely. "Please, B, say it again." "I love you," she repeated against his shoulder, feeling her own tears start. "I love you. I choose you. I want you. Is that clear enough?" His answer was to kiss her, deep and thorough, and filled with 9 years of pent-up devotion. She kissed him back with equal fervor, letting herself feel everything she had suppressed, every moment of longing she had refused to acknowledge, every instance of love disguised as mere friendship. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing through tears, Callum cupped her face in his hands with infinite tenderness. "I love you so much," he said simply. "Have loved you for so long, I barely remember what it felt like not to love you. And I promise you, Beatrice Sutherland, I will spend the rest of our lives making certain you never regret choosing me." "I know," she replied, meaning it completely. "Because you have already spent 9 years proving your devotion. The hard part is over, Callum. Now we just get to be happy." They stood together beneath the oak tree, wrapped in each other's arms, as the spring afternoon stretched golden around them. Somewhere nearby, birds sang. Flowers bloomed in gardens they had walked through countless times. The world continued exactly as before, and yet everything had changed entirely. Later, there would be difficult conversations, with her father about breaking the engagement, with Dominic to ensure his path forward with Clara, with society to weather the inevitable gossip. But in this moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the man holding her, the love finally acknowledged, and the future that stretched ahead filled with possibilities she had spent years refusing to imagine. "So," Callum said after a long, comfortable silence, "what do we do now?" Beatrice smiled against his shoulder. Now we start planning our own wedding. Though perhaps we should wait a respectable interval after breaking my engagement to Dominic." 3 months? 6? An eternity, he groaned, but his eyes were laughing. "Though I suppose after waiting 9 years, a few more months will not kill me. It will give your uncle time to gift you that estate he mentioned, Thornwick House, I believe, and us time to plan properly, to let the gossip die down, to do everything correctly." "Since when do you care about doing things correctly?" She pulled back enough to look at him, her expression turning serious. "Since I realized that this time, with you, I want to do everything right. No rushing, no scandal more than necessary, no doubts. I want everyone to see that this is real, Callum, that we are choosing each other freely and completely." The love in his eyes at those words made her breath catch all over again. "Then we will do it properly," he agreed. 6 months of courtship under society's watchful eye. Your reputation preserved as much as possible. Everything done correctly." He grinned suddenly. though I reserve the right to kiss you senseless in private as often as possible during those 6 months." "I would expect nothing less," she replied primly, then ruined the effect by pulling him down for another kiss. They had wasted 9 years already. She was not about to waste another moment of the happiness that was finally, miraculously, within reach. The scandal, when it broke, proved both more and less than expected. Beatrice formally released Dominic from their engagement, citing irreconcilable differences in expectations for marriage. Society whispered, certainly, Miss Sutherland had always been odd, too intellectual, too independent. Now she had proven herself romantic and impractical as well, breaking an advantageous match for a mere second son. But the Duke of Thornbury's subtle influence worked as promised. Within weeks, discreet revelations emerged about Dominic's attachment to Miss Clara Hartley, about his honorable refusal to proceed with a marriage when his heart was engaged elsewhere. The narrative shifted. He became the noble gentleman too principled to enter a loveless union. She, the understanding young woman who released him to pursue genuine happiness. 6 weeks after the broken engagement, Dominic formally began courting Clara. His family, faced with the reality of his determination and the social acceptance enabled by the Duke's maneuvering, grudgingly approved. They married 4 months later in a quiet ceremony that nonetheless radiated genuine joy. Callum and Beatrice attended as friends, the 4 of them united in having fought for love over convenience. As for Callum and Beatrice themselves, they courted with scrupulous propriety, walks in Hyde Park, attendance at the opera, dancing precisely 2 dances at balls. But everyone who saw them together remarked on the evident devotion, the way they looked at each other as if sharing private jokes, the comfortable ease that suggested years of friendship beneath the romance. When Callum finally formally proposed 6 months after their garden confession, Beatrice accepted with tears and laughter and a kiss that scandalized her chaperone. They married on a brilliant autumn day at the parish church near Sutherland Hall, surrounded by family and friends who had watched their long friendship finally blossom into acknowledged love. The Duke of Thornbury stood proudly beside his nephew, having fulfilled his promise to settle Thornwick House upon Callum and to serve as partner in Beatrice's agricultural venture. But the greatest gift, Beatrice reflected as she walked down the aisle toward her best friend and soon-to-be husband, was freedom. Freedom to choose love. Freedom to acknowledge feeling. Freedom to build a life with someone who saw her completely and cherished what he saw. Callum met her at the altar with tears in his eyes and a smile that made her heart soar. When they spoke their vows, promises to love and honor and cherish, every word carried the weight of 9 years of friendship, of patient devotion finally rewarded, of 2 people who had found their way to each other despite taking the longest possible route. As the rector pronounced them husband and wife, Beatrice looked into Callum's green eyes and saw their entire future reflected back. Challenges they would face together, joys they would share, a partnership built on the strongest foundation possible, genuine love between equals who knew each other's hearts completely. "I love you," she whispered as he pulled her close for their first kiss as man and wife. "I have loved you for longer than I was willing to admit, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I you," he replied against her lips, "always and forever, my dearest bee, my friend, my partner, my love." In the pews, Dominic sat beside Clara, their own wedding set for the following month. 4 people who had all found the courage to choose love over convenience, to risk scandal for genuine happiness, to believe that the human heart was worth more than social position or financial security. As Beatrice and Callum walked back down the aisle hand in hand, married at last, she thought of her younger self, the girl who had believed love was frivolous, who had armored herself with logic and pragmatism, who had nearly let the greatest gift of her life slip away unnoticed. How wrong she had been. How beautifully, wonderfully wrong. True wisdom, she had learned, was not in protecting yourself from feeling. It was in having the courage to feel deeply, to love fully, to trust that some things, some people, were worth any risk. And Callum Fitzroy, her dearest friend, her patient love, her husband, had been worth waiting 9 years to see clearly. Dear listener, perhaps you know what it feels like to be afraid of your own heart, to build walls of logic and reason around feelings that frighten you with their intensity, to look at love and call it impractical, to see devotion and dismiss it as sentiment. Beatrice spent 9 years protecting herself from vulnerability, only to discover that the greatest risk was not in loving too deeply, but in refusing to love at all. Sometimes the person who will change your life forever has been standing beside you all along, waiting patiently for you to see what they offered. In your own life, there may be love you have not acknowledged, friendship that holds deeper truth, connections you have convinced yourself mean less than they do. Perhaps tonight is the moment to let down your guard, to admit that feeling deeply is not weakness, but profound courage, to recognize that the most practical choice is sometimes the one that makes your heart sing. You are worthy of being loved with patience and devotion. You deserve someone who sees you completely and cherishes what they see. And if fear has kept you from acknowledging feelings that matter, know that it is never too late to choose differently, to choose love, to choose courage, to choose the happiness that waits when you finally open your eyes. Thank you for staying with us through Beatrice and Callum's journey. If this story of patient love and hard-won happiness touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue creating tales of courage, redemption, and love that endures. Until our next story, may you have the wisdom to recognize love when it stands before you.